That brings me to in your book you talk about just how much of this are we just manifesting ourselves, over and over and over and over and over again. And could it be in fact that we are manifesting exactly what we intend?
All of it, all of it. Now that is going to be the greatest source of resistance as it pertains to believers. There is going to be such a fine line between what we understand and know about predestination and manifestation. Because for many of us, we understand some things so superficially that those beliefs are always very fragile. And predestination is probably one of the most confusing precepts in all of Christendom. Because while people hear, we've been predestined to be conformed to the image of his son, most of us, we wouldn't even follow Jesus. Think about it. He was preaching all of this back then. And you talked about, can we even perceive or see something that is this way out of the box? And it's the very reason Jesus showed up on the scene doing things that defied all logic.
Right. Yeah.
He had to remind us. He wasn't showing us something. He didn't create miracles. All he did was manifest the ability that had been there when Adam and Eve was created. And so he was just unveiling, and the Bible says it clearly, he just unveiled these dark faces of ours. And he reminded us, nothing is impossible if you just believe.
Right.
And so things that were really, really very basic and simple, we tag some brands and some labels on them, and we industrialize church so heavily that you're not going to benefit from this unless you toe the line.
Right.
So does that kind of go to why you wrote the book, trying to uncover some of these things so that people can understand?
Yeah, I think so. You get to a certain point, you're sitting there and you're typing away. At some point, I did at least, I could just go on and get rich and not even bother with this, really.
But we had some discussion about that.
Yeah, certainly. Because once you understand it, there is no burden there that says you have to share it with other people. That you have to, write a book and potentially set yourself up for criticism and whatever. Because, you get any fan mail? I haven't gotten any yet. So, well, that's not true.
We've got
that's true. We have
favorable response.
And I'm certainly not intending myself to be a martyr on this subject.
Good for you. Because I'm not out.
Because you'd be right there next to me.
Oh man.
Yeah, but I think there certainly is compassion there, and then just being compelled, and you look at it as this is obvious. This is along the path, right? And you get into this whole idea of, what's good, what's bad, what's hard, what's easy. This was easy, and it's funny because I just ran into someone. I've talked to two people in the last week. One person told me that they've been trying to write a book for 20 years. That's nice. And I talked to someone else who just can't manage to finish the book. Whatever it is, I'm not even certain of what the real content of the book should be. And what's amazed me, and we just had a conversation about this, is just the ease at which it was done. Again, to see even the way it came together, it would preclude that, we had tons of meeting and sending drafts back and forth and blah, 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 and it just didn't, it was just such a flow, which really is one of the requirements, I believe, for people to understand with law of attraction, is that, once you kind of set your intention and you really then become detached, right? Because that's really what faith really is certainty with detachment. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the whole idea of why am I asking more than once? And then we get into this whole idea of vain repetition, and you know, the whole fact that we have vain repetition and we keep going back to God, praying over and over and over, is evidence of how much faith we don't have. And people say, well, you can't say that. Well, Jesus spent a lot of his time going around grading faith. You, little faith, great faith. You got the best faith I've ever seen right there. That's some kind of faith.
That's him.
Jesus graded faith. So if you didn't want your faith to be graded, and he got on those disciples more than anybody, you know. And it's funny because I don't believe is this. I'm trying to remember if this is in the book or one of my other writings that you know, you find situations where things don't work out well for believers, and again they run back to must not have been God's will. You know, well, Jesus comes down off the Mount of Transfiguration, and so the disciples are standing there, the people all around him, because they got this demoniac boy, and they don't know what to do with him. And Jesus is like, guys, come on. The people, come on. What are you doing to me? Look at this. And then, like, you know, Jesus handles the situation. And, of course, they didn't want to be any more publicly humiliated. They get him off to the side. Why couldn't we cast him out? And he said that in this kind of come without but by fasting and prayer. But really what he's still dealing with is your focus. He's dealing with their focus and dealing with their faith at all points in everything. So, oh man. But let me say this too. I want to say this though, because I don't want to make sure I don't forget to say it. In terms of inspired action, that becomes the actual key. Is that you will not set your intention and then just it's done. Just nothing. At some point along the line, there's going to be something that you have to do. But that inspired action should be easy for you. It should be within the flow. You should be able to do it with complete joy and be totally harmonious within yourself as you're doing it. And what I find mostly with people that I talk to, counsel, coach, or whatever, is that inspired action, they don't take the inspired action. And what they don't understand is after you've done this for a while, when you get to the point of inspired action, what will happen is you'll then be confronted with your resistance, and your resistance becomes more obvious to you. So if it's a limiting belief, or it's a lack of faith, or it could be fear, or whatever, it becomes more obvious. And then you have the opportunity right then and there to expose it and deal with it and call it what it is, because you have to do that, get beyond it, and go back to the place of detachment and joy before you carry out the inspired action. Now, here's the key with that, is that people will want to carry out the inspired action as though they're being, like, because we always talk about God sometimes like he has a gun to our heads. You know, the Lord's making me do this. You know, it's God, it ain't me. God just telling me it's not me. You know, we go into that whole thing. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. You can't do that. Whatever the inspired action is that you have to take, you have to be able to take it with absolute joy and just fullness of faith in that. Because if you don't, and you carry your fear or your limiting beliefs or your doubts, any of those things into it, then you now season the act with the feelings that you possess. And so although you've done the act, you've tainted it. Because the reality is not the importance of what you do with your hands as much as what you do with your heart and what you feel and you project. So even though we tend to do the right things, we do them begrudgingly, we do them in anger, you know, we do them in sadness and sorrow. It's like, and you're seasoning your food with all the wrong stuff when you do that. So even in inspired action, it has to be totally focused and full of faith and joy in that moment. If not, you just wait. Get beyond that or you're in trouble.